Hello, everyone. You're in the right place. I'm Brett Starr. I'm the CEO and founder of the Starr Conspiracy. Joined today by Steve and Julie. We'll be doing some introductions here in a little bit, but we're going to give folks a couple of minutes to filter in. Talk amongst yourselves as we are. How you doing today, Julie?
I'm doing great, Brett. So good to be with you guys. It's been a
So good to see
while.
you. Yeah, it has.
Looking good.
Yeah. Oh, me? Oh, come
You're
on.
both looking good. Yeah. Doing good
Steve.
work.
It's all good lighting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How you
I feel
doing,
like I
Steve?
need one of those, what are those round lighting fixtures? I haven't gotten one of those yet, but
I've got one of those, but it's just like I leave it off a lot of times because it's like
okay.
being in an interrogation, and
I feel like that moment's kind of passed because like I was really excited about that. Like I love Anderson Cooper, and you can always see those like rings in his eyes, and now I can see when people have that ring because of that eye effect.
Interesting.
And, like
Keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I don't know. All right, well, Steve, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
All righty. Thank you, Brett. I'm Steve Smith. I'm one of the partners here at Starr Conspiracy and Chief Marketing Officer, and I'm very happy to introduce our guest for today, Julie Norquist Roy, a good long-term friend of the firm and former client. And Julie, why don't you kick us off by just telling us a little bit about you?
Sure. So happy to be back with you guys. So I've been running marketing at various software companies over the last 25 years. I got my start in Europe. I was working for a spinoff of Business Objects. So I was living in Paris and got it kind of thrown into the fire there and grew that company to where we went through an acquisition to, we were sold to Salesforce. So that was a great exit. Moved back to the States, California, and joined Cornerstone On Demand, which is where I met you guys, which was fantastic. And that was quite a rocket ship. In 5 years, when I started, we were about 7 million in AR and grew to over 125 million 5 years later. And during that time, went through an IPO and really, really exciting time, as you can imagine, where I got my gray hairs, but learned a ton. Went over to a company called Kyriba doing treasury and cash management, another SaaS company, enterprise software company, and then joined Chrome River in 2015 and had a wonderful 4 years there where I built the marketing organization to where we were acquired by a private equity firm in 2019. And since that period, I've been advising, fast growth startups to upwards of like 50 million, companies that are looking to grow beyond 100 million. So that's kind of my sweet spot, is operating in that fashion. And I do want to say that in these organizations, while I was head of marketing, CMO, you get your hands in a lot of different things, right? You're working with generally founding CEOs, founder CEOs, and you get to experience, I would say, all the different, facets of fast growth companies. You're kind of dealing with sales, you're working with customer experience, you're, working with product. And so you really get I was fortunate to get a very, large overview of how organizations function versus just spending time in marketing.
Well, yeah,
so that's where I am today.
Well, and I mean, it's just like you have, such an impressive background as a marketing leader. Cornerstone has become an iconic brand kind of within the work tech space, and you were there kind of from the beginning. But Kyriba and Chrome River, if I'm understanding this correctly, they were both ended up becoming $1 billion+ valuation or market cap companies. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You are correct, Steve. Chrome River, we, grew the company to around 70 million in AR. And then at the time of the acquisition, we did a roll up. So that's where, the PE firm has other firms that are similar kind of business models, selling similar products. And so we rolled those up into, kind of 6-7 companies doing expense and cash management and invoice management. And so suddenly I found myself managing 7 brands versus 1 brand. and was also tasked to kind of step in as operating GM of Cornerstone, because I knew the business pretty well. So that, that was, became well over $1 billion valuation at that point.
Well, and I guess I bring that up because it's just like any one of those stops would have been, a career maker for most people. And I think that, taking a company from essentially true startup mode to essentially, $1 billion valuation is kind of the dream, but it's really hard to do. Obviously, it just doesn't happen. When you kind of look back at that ride on all of those, it's just like, what is it that you think it takes that sets a company that is like on Cornerstone trajectory or one of those other ones from one that doesn't make it at an early stage?
Well, first of all, I want to say, I think partially it's luck. I kind of landed in the right place at the right time. I'd moved back to California. I, was wrapping up that acquisition with Salesforce, and I was working in an art gallery, Steve. I thought, I'm coming back to California. I'm going to sell art. And then I got the opportunity at Cornerstone, and I, partially it was persistence, sending emails to Adam, but, obviously ended up in the right place at the right time. And then, we hear a lot about kind of tenures of CMOs being quite short. And so one of my, mottos is just produce, execute, always look at, the results. If you're looking at fast growth, you don't want to be coasting along. You've got to really hit it out of the park almost every month, every quarter. And, it does take a certain amount of stamina. I will say that by the end of different tenures, I always needed a little bit of time off, took a break. Went on a nice vacation or just relaxed, got some massages, but it does take a certain amount of stamina. So just keeping that in mind. But I like to set goals. I like to build teams that set goals. And I like to, as I mentioned, kind of operate beyond marketing, because a lot of times people think marketing are building trade shows or designing brochures. And, what I like to think about more is kind of the go-to-market strategy. How are we going to grow the business? Are the customers buying our products? Why are they buying the products? Let's get the stories. Let's tell those stories. Let's understand them. Just absolutely, infinitely every detail of why somebody buys your product. While I've operated mostly in enterprise software sales, I think this applies across the board. And so how do you get to a model where it's incredibly predictable and scalable? I think those are kind of the two words. I know you alluded to kind of what a board's looking at. That's what they're looking at. They want to see that your model is predictable and scalable.
Okay, that's a key insight. So, another thing that you touched on, and Brett, I'd be kind of curious to get your take on this, is like really essentially marketing thinking outside of the marketing silo. And it's something that we've kind of been beating the drum on about, not just sales marketing alignment, but aligning really across the entire customer experience. So Brett, when you hear all of the things that Julie's been talking about, what kind of pops into mind for you?
Well, Julie is like a perfect example of probably coming to the same conclusions that I've come to in many ways, which is not only can marketing not work in a silo, it has to work within the entire customer experience domain, but also with all your board experience. I serve on a lot of boards as well. There's a relationship between shareholder experience and customer experience and employee experience. And you've spent a lot of time in work tech. And so you really see that relationship between employee experience and customer experience play out in terms of, the way that companies treat their employees when their purpose and value proposition is tied to creating a great employee experience. So I'd say from just the CX perspective, we believe at the Starr Conspiracy that, customer experience is one of three primary experience domains: employee experience, customer experience, shareholder experience, and that each has subdomains that one must view holistically. And so in customer experience, you have the brand experience, you have the marketing experience, you have the sales experience, you have the product experience, and you have customer success. And what I saw at Cornerstone, and I'm sure a lot of in what you've seen, Julie, and like the entire arc of your career, is that most of the problems for organizations who don't succeed are created by breaks in continuity and experience. So if brand and marketing are projecting, one vision that works, from a driving results perspective. And the product's great, but it does something completely different than what, the message is in the market. Then often sales gets caught in the middle, and customer success ends up being a triage function of trying to reset expectations as customers come in. And, all the research that we've done and all the research that we, see out in the marketplace is that there has to be a more holistic customer experience driven view that combines those 5 subdomains. But I think Julie's a perfect example of, most people think that customer experience leadership should come from marketing because of the skill set, which is primarily a strategic planning and communication skill set that allows us to bring all of these components together so that we don't create these breaks in continuity where, like, brand says one thing, marketing, is like running their digital marketing campaigns and trying to perform well from a metrics perspective on the keywords that are really important, but those keywords are bringing in a buyer that is out of alignment with what the core value proposition is of the product. So I'm just curious about how much more clear that connection, not just between, all the subdomains of CX, but also that connection between, in your board positions, the shareholder experience, the customer experience, and the employee experience all come together to define success or failure with organizations.
100%. I mean, you're absolutely speaking my language. Some of the things I do when I come into organizations, I've joined as a CMO, is I bring in somebody from the outside, because if I'm just coming in and telling them what their story is, that's not always necessarily well received. Is I bring somebody in from the outside. We just go back to the fundamentals. Who are we as a company? What's our why? Why are we here? What do we do every day? Why do we get up in the morning? And so once we're able to get to that through kind of a workshop, workshopping it out, bringing it all together, you're coming up with that kind of brand story, the brand proposition about your company. And then you need to live every part of that story throughout your organization. And so it's not just about, the trade show booth. It's not about your marketing materials. And, I have ruffled a little bit of feathers when I've suggested that customer experience and brand and marketing need to be tightly intertwined, potentially owned by marketing. I'll be honest, it has ruffled some feathers, but I absolutely agree with that, because ultimately your brand is what your employees think about your company, what your customers think about your company. You're spending all this time in marketing to build this fantastic story about your company and your brand. But then if your customer experience is subpar, I mean, that's going to take away all the brand equity and faith in your company that you've been trying so hard to build, and quite frankly, spending a lot of money to build. And so I would, build these kind of brand mission statements, working with the CEO and the executive team, and we would share them with sales. We'd share them with the customer success organization. We'd try to get people as excited about that as we could. And 100%, it has to be permeating everybody within your company. And we had a study, it was at Cornerstone, where a certain percentage drop in employee experience very directly impacted the customer experience. I think it was something flagrant, like 5% equals 10%. And so that's significant when you're looking to retain customers, which is incidentally one of the things that the board is looking at the most, which is your net dollar retention. So incredibly important to the strategy of your organization.
So how many times have you been in this position? I'm sorry, I just have to ask, because, you get brought in onto a board. Typically there are roles on a board, and it's like, oh, we brought this person on because of their marketing expertise. We brought this person on because of their, finance expert, whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. And how many times have you been in a board meeting and have come to the conclusion in the first quarter, and then in the second quarter, and in the third quarter, and in the fourth quarter, that basically there's a problem with the employee experience inside that organization that is limiting the customer experience and the shareholder experience, and bringing that up and kind of having people, like, why are we even talking about that? Or is that not a thing? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think I'm probably fortunate, Brett, to work with really great CEOs that are very motivating and inspirational. So, in that sense, I would say the employee experience was probably pretty good, and so I wasn't coming into the company and saying there's a problem here. But I have seen it happen. And I'm quite frank about it, actually, and have suggested, working with whoever's heading up the HR organization to first, conduct some surveys, to do it very objectively, and most importantly, follow up on the feedback. So, sometimes people put out the survey to the employees and then they don't really circle back, and actually having actionable things happen as a result of those surveys. So addressing, workshopping out some of the issues that people are seeing, and actually involving the employees in participating, creating committees to help address those issues. And so those are ways that, and then we could spend a whole webinar on just this topic because it is fascinating, is letting the employees help drive the change in culture. I mean, ultimately, if you don't create a culture, help drive a culture, it will create itself. And you want to be there to monitor and guide and test and check. And it's incredibly important to the success of the organization.
Wow. Well, I mean, this is all just, incredibly, insightful, I think, to really kind of like, drill down onto this. One of the things that I know that, coming into this conversation that we wanted to talk about a little bit was, your time at Cornerstone is really kind of a case study for, really just, dynamic growth. What I'm kind of curious is, not necessarily going into the, what happened then, but, Cornerstone was an interesting case because like 2011, you had the SuccessFactors SAP acquisition, the Talea Oracle, and there probably was a moment there where it's just sort of like, oh, wow, we weren't first, we weren't the market leader. And things turned out really well for Cornerstone in the long run. When you think back on that time and what you did and what you were able to accomplish, is that something that could be replicated today? Or what are some of the key learns that you think that people who are dealing either as a founder or, a sales and marketing leader, looking at their CX, what are things that you think that you learned then that they can take away from right now in this market?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we know the marketing motion has changed a bit since, that time, which was 2007, 2012. But that said, a lot of the fundamentals remain the same. And again, speaking kind of just outside marketing, but the full go-to-market motion is you want to make sure that your product is a good product market fit, and that customers actually need your product. It's good to listen to your customers. I mean, we created a customer advisory board, and I've actually managed some customer advisory boards at a couple companies since then. That is incredibly valuable to get customers that are vocal, that are using your product, that are able to provide, very valuable insights on the direction of the product as well as the company. Incidentally, maybe some partnerships we might be looking at, some geographic expansion, brand, refreshes. We would run it by our customer advisory board, and that can be incredibly helpful. But going back to the fundamentals is you want to make sure your customers need, want, desire your product, and so that needs to happen. And then all the different metrics that we read a lot about, SaaS metrics, the lifetime value, looking at the CAC ratios, looking at net retention, looking at your AR growth. You want to monitor those closely. What is the sales ratio heads to your AR? What is your customer success team to your AR? What's your entire employee base to your AR? So just monitoring all those metrics and making sure that you're in an upward trend versus a downward trend. And all of that was very applicable then, and it's still very applicable today. Everything around brand, building your brand. It just so happens that today there's more or different ways to build your brand. I mean, we're seeing that influencers are incredibly impactful. We've seen that, SEO channels are now delivering, a large part of pipeline in most of the companies I work with, because it tends to be content that has a very authentic thought leadership bent, and so that's people are, buyers are very, very smart nowadays. They're very informed. And so they're going to find their own information before a company's even reaching out to them. And so you want to make sure you're in the marketplace getting that information to buyers. And so, all these fundamentals, while they've evolved, they're still incredibly relevant today.
Well, there are two things that stand out to me there, and I just want to double click on them for a moment. And you're going to have to correct all the falsehoods that I say right now.
I like the double click.
Yeah. Well, do people still do that? Is there still? I don't know. It's all AI now. We'll talk to Steve about AI later. I think there were two things that were happening if we just kind of go back in time to that, Success Factors, Taleo, Connexa, Cornerstone on Demand, like whole, moment. Number one, and this is directly relevant to how to find the opportunities in a downturn and how to find opportunities when, the market is in flux and when there's a new organizing principle in the market. It was widely reported at the time that Success Factors was acquired by SAP. Leading up to that they had some of the lowest net promoter scores like ever recorded, like it broke the machines. And this is no hate on Success Factors, because keep in mind that, one of the things that Success Factors did was they were part of bringing something to the cloud that was, not in the cloud, right? So they were running a pure market share strategy. And it was just about driving as much brand recognition. Brand recognition at least correlates heavily to market share in about a 12 to 18 month gap. I believe it's causal, but can't prove it. And so they were running a market share strategy, but you pointed to something that's very important, which is if you look at the upswing of Cornerstone on Demand versus what was going on with Success Factors, there's some evidence there at the time that a stronger customer experience oriented approach that combines brand, marketing, sales, product, and customer success is actually a more durable approach. But at the same time, there's a little bit of a downturn around that period. And, those companies, Taleo, Success Factors, were purchased by organizations that tend to really tighten their belts during downturns. So you kind of had two things going for you, maybe. Number one was a holistic CX approach. And number two was you were able to be more aggressive at building brand recognition and taking control of the narrative in the market. I remember at the time, basically Cornerstone was like, the odd one out because they stayed very focused on what they were trying to do. And it looked like all the other organizations were becoming, like much more expansive in terms of the pursuit of like a different approach to a platform. So just that, staying true to your CX, but also taking advantages of opportunities in a downturn when, what were considered your peer competitors at the time were pulling back, seems like also some things that we can learn from, but maybe I'm making stuff up. I don't know.
No, that was really accurate, Brett. Well said. I mean, I remember, Success Factors and Taleo, particularly Success Factors, weren't they spending the same amount of their revenue on sales and marketing? I mean, it was just difficult to compete. And I remember telling the team, we just need to be more clever. I mean, that was my word that I used with the team. And the second thing we talked about was you buy from your peers. You want to buy from people that are happy with the product. And so let's showcase all our customers. And that was something we did in our marketing push, was really leveraging our happy customers, which, as you mentioned, we did quite well at that. And so we had our customers speaking on our behalf. And so that was something that we leveraged. But you're right, they were more in a brand building, market share grab. They got to acquisition or IPO faster. And yet Cornerstone stayed true, to those values, those CX values. And I remember the team, at one point, Adam sat us down and said, look, we're going to maybe sacrifice profitability to really build all the tools and systems and organizational structure that we need to make our customers the happiest in the market. And I remember that moment. It was very pivotal. And I think that was really what helped us build to where we are, where we were at that point going public. So that was, that I think was a very smart move. Yeah.
Just two quick questions. Do you ever go like, yes, when you look back on it? And then second is like, how many times have you kind of seen that same dynamic as you've, moved on to all these other great organizations and in the boards that you serve on, where you can kind of see the lane for opportunity because of what's going on with who are considered, the market share leaders and the market leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I a lot of times I've worked for the underdog when I've come in, and I actually enjoy that the most. I talked to some companies that were kind of the market leader, and I have to say I was kind of like, ho hum. I didn't want to be with the market leader. I wanted to be with the underdog. There must be something in my DNA that I like to challenge myself. But for example, Chrome River, I mean, we were absolutely the little guy against Concur. So everybody knows Concur. And so you have to do things that are different. You have to have a better product. You have to have happier customers. You have to build a more clever way of branding the company. You have to stand out, and so we did certain things to be true to our brand, and a brand that we felt was very, very unique. And we would, really speak to the CFOs. We had a whole campaign around sticky notes to the CFO, like, please, Mrs. CFO, can you please get us Chrome River for these reasons? And then we would hide all the power positions that we would build about the differentiators we had with the company. And so we just hammered those brand messages. I think every company can be different. I think the environment can be slightly different. The context can be different. Again, I'm speaking mostly about enterprise, mid to large sales software, companies. So, kind of apply that to the context you're in. So you have to come in and assess, look at the environment, look at the companies that are there. Why are they winning? When are you winning? Why are you winning against them? And find that sweet spot and really emphasize it. And again, every company is going to have a little bit different context.
Yeah. Sorry, Steve, I've got to ask one more question. So in this underdog context, which I'm just also so compelled by, because, I mean, if you look at any market, most companies are the underdog, right? The law of market shares can say that, 2, 3, or 4 companies are going to own 50% of the total market. And then there's, the long tail of other competitors who are trying to get in. Certainly in these situations, where you have a strong CX approach, which it sounds like you're very committed to. We're in a period right now of one of the periods of greatest churn in history, where a bunch of companies are losing a bunch of their clients. Y'all must have been, in every company that you worked at, must have been the beneficiary of churn from other companies, because you had less churn, right? You were shoring up your CX. You were focused on the connection all the way from brand to customer success. And when churn increases, you just think about, like, there's a lot of markets right now where, in work tech specifically, where, there's a couple of companies who actually have too much market share based on a healthy market. And they're going to experience the, kind of biggest, like, wave of churn. And yet there are these other underdog, companies who have this significant opportunity where they're holding on to their customers and also are the biggest beneficiary of, like, churn coming from other companies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's yin and yang, right? When company, we do, most of the companies I've worked with, we do target the dinosaurs in the market, the ones that have been around for quite a long time, that have these large enterprise organizations that have been working with them for 10 years. And, what we've seen is they're just not innovating. They're not providing the customer experience that these customers now want. We know it's hard to rip and replace solutions, but when they get to a point where the pain is too great, they're very open to conversations. And if you can help them and accompany them in that journey and make it as painless as possible, maybe even provide services at no cost to help them make that change. A lot of times also they're dealing with change management issues. Customers, our employees have been using this product for so long. Make sure you have teams that can help them in that journey to make that change management process as easy as possible. So really thinking through it from the customer's perspective. What will this change mean? What is the change? What's the benefit of that change? Being able to monetize that or articulate it in a way that's meaningful to their executive team and their users, and then helping them walk through that change.
Well, and didn't the pandemic just, like, really solidify for a lot of buyers whether they love or hate the current solution they have? And so that pain that you're talking about has become poignant. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now.
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic had numerous effects across organizations. You know, we came out of 2021 and into 2022 thinking, wow, you know, we've been through hell. And now it's going to be this amazing year. And then fast forward to, was it August timeframe where, whoa, it's not what we thought it was going to be. And so we've had to kind of reframe again, pivot again, during a period which actually wasn't so bad for growth. And now we're in a situation where we have to really tighten our belts, pull back. Companies are reticent to spend. You know, budgets are being cut. We're seeing lots of layoffs. And so it is a new context. And I'm hopeful that 2023 will be a better market for everybody, but I don't have a crystal ball, so it's going to be difficult to say. I'd be curious to get your guys' thoughts on it. Yeah, stagflation.
Yeah, look, stagflation, I'm sorry to even bring this word up. It's something that like happens 2 or 3 times every century.
Yeah.
But we're living in a time where, you know, things that only happen like once or twice a century are happening. And, you know, I think that we all feel buoyed in some way by the notion that unemployment is still really low as prices increase. But also there's a lot of just like emotional sentiment out there that is causing people to tighten their belts in ways that lead to layoffs and stuff like that. We've seen a lot of people exit the workforce, et cetera. And so I would say if the last 3 years have taught me anything, because I totally feel what you're saying, Julie. It's like, you know, we like a lot of organizations prospered during the pandemic in different ways. And then there's this other shoe falling about, you know, like 2022, where like the economy became very uncertain. And what's that based on? Because it doesn't really seem like any of the economic indicators that we're accustomed to planning around make sense anymore. And like if that, you know, doesn't make sense, then, you know, it creates room for these like, you know, scary notions like stagflation, which I've only seen, I think, on, you know, black and white videos, you know,
Way back in the day, right?
Well, it happened in the 1970s and happened in the 1930s. And that's the only 2 times that we've seen it in the US. But you know, no one has a playbook for stagflation, but, you know, I don't know.
I have to read more up on that.
Well, I think, well, you know, one thing that's kind of jumped out in this conversation that I wanted to get your take on, and it's related to kind of the environment that we're in, where you know, maybe we in tech feel that things are worse than they are in the broader economy, since this is, I think I heard something yesterday, more job cuts in tech in 2022 than any year since 2002. So, you know, really kind of this is a generational down market for tech. And knowing that there's, you know, unfortunately, a lot of, well, I guess fortunately, there's a lot of people out there who haven't been through times like these. And when you look back at like, you know, that 2008 period, and you know, we were talking about success factors, there were, you know, like 2007, 8, 9, they were investing something like over 100% of revenue every year in sales and marketing. And we're sort of in an environment right now where you've had a lot of negativity from investors about, you know, growth at all costs. And I think that there's sort of a newfound, and we were talking about this, Kevin and I, with Charles Bedard yesterday, about kind of a newfound emphasis on R value and gross profit, net revenue retention, and just like there, you know, yeah, we want growth, but we want profitability as well. Yeah, I mean, and you know, it's just like you can't run that success factors playbook today, I don't think.
No.
You know what, you know, if you're a growth company, what do you need to be looking at if that's the case?
No, I mean, absolutely. It's, they want growth, but they want profitability. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. There's not a lot of access to capital right now. It's about really tightening up tightening the belt, making sure that everything is functioning in the most efficient way across the organization. You know, very keen eye on metrics, all the different metrics around, you know, NRR, you know, profitability, ratios on AR to headcount. These are all incredibly important. Now, why now? And that's kind of interesting to think about. I mean, we were chatting earlier about, the downturns. I don't know if I'm dating myself here, but I went through, 2001, 2008, 2011, and now today. And they're all, they all have a different flavor. Some of them were human caused, market caused, and some were, not coming from us, but rather, pandemics and natural disasters. But at the end of the day, you come back to the fundamentals. And so then the question is, okay, we're trying to grow and we're trying to be profitable, but how do we ensure we come out the other side in the right position? And so one of the things that I'm speaking to, the CEOs and, board members, executive teams about is making sure you don't drop the ball on your brand, making sure you don't drop the ball on innovation, making sure that you're keeping a keen eye on those metrics. Because if you come out the other side and your brand has been completely diluted, and the sales metrics are not trending upward, you're not going to be in a good position. And so how do you do that is kind of the thing to consider. But there are ways to build your brand without spending excessive amounts of dollars. And so that's where, I'm kind of advising on the clever ways to get in and keep your brand alive and growing. Generally, I like to really work with customers. That's a great way to get your brand, keep it vibrant. Influencers in the marketplace, we have a relationship with Gartner. I'm a big believer in the analyst community, particularly Gartner. I think they have incredibly knowledgeable people over there and great content. I often hear pay for play. I actually think they're pretty authentic in what they do. And I'll tell you, getting a ranking or a recognition in a Gartner report is worth gold. I've seen that across the board in all the companies I've worked with. So, keeping an eye on the fundamentals. You don't have to have excessive, crazy spend like the success factors model back in the day. You don't have to do that anymore. And if you have the luxury of doing it, it's maybe not the best thing anyway. Just burning cash for no reason, for the sake of burning cash. I think there are ways to grow your market slow and steady. Are the 100% year-over-year growth rates now expected? Probably not. I think the market is happy with at least what I'm seeing, a 30% year-over-year. Now, again, it's a different context for different companies, but that's generally what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that all makes sense, because it's just like, especially if you can get that 30% with good EBITDA, then then I think that's definitely a no-brainer. Another thing, just to I don't want to hit this too hard, but it really is, when you look at success factors versus Cornerstone. Success Factors was definitely doing we're just going to acquire a bunch of companies. We're going to buy Plateau, and we're going to buy, a couple of other ones, and we're going to smash them all together, because we want to be able to tell that end-to-end story. And Cornerstone did a very different thing. They were like, nope, we're going to have an organic platform. It's all going to fit together. And it's just like, y'all stuck by that long after that the rest of the market was just in sort of an acquisition frenzy. And it's just
on average, Success Factors, Taleo, Conexa had 7 acquisitions. They all IPO'd at about the same value. And that was one of the things that really stood out at the time, was just the adherence to building everything versus like using all that fresh capital to go out and buy a bunch of stuff and stick it together. And so, it was 7 acquisitions on average for each of those 3 companies at that time.
But it's just like, go ahead, Julie.
No, just the organic growth was definitely one of our power positions. We spent a lot of time emphasizing that. I think it did pay off. I mean, we know that when you acquire companies, the change management involved, how do you smash these products together? What do you sunset? How is that going to impact your customer experience? There's so many difficult hurdles to get over when you do that. It can be very successful, but it's much more challenging, and you get very distracted. The business is very distracted when you do those acquisitions. And so having that organic growth allowed us to be very focused, which was, I think in the end, did pay off.
Well, look at the brand taxonomy issues that were associated with those organizations around having to reconfigure like their, getting a little geeky, name brand strings. If you look at like Taleo and Oracle, and like if you can try to orient yourself back in that time to their product catalog with all the crazy names that they had. It was a combination of descriptive names and metaphoric names and evocative names, and just like it was like if you were here in Taleo Talent Cloud or whatever, you had no idea what the relationship was between that and the other talent management solutions that were provided. Not saying that the acquisition strategy doesn't work, but at Cornerstone at that time, there was not the same challenges around creating a name brand taxonomy that allowed people a strong sense of psychological comfort around navigating like all the products that you offered, because it was more straightforward because it was all, like there.
Yeah, I remember using the Franken house, house of, and then you look at it, do you want a house of brands? Do you want a branded house? I mean, all those questions come up. We dealt with that more recently at Chrome River with the PE acquisition and the roll up. And so we went for having a house of brands to start. But the idea was eventually morphed to a branded house. And so I thought that was a good strategy, given all the products were kind of up and down market. They had various, buyers segments. So I thought that worked well, but it's not without its challenges. It can definitely work.
I'm stealing that forever. The house of brands versus the branded house. That's now mine.
I didn't make that up, by the way. That's
Don't expose my ignorance.
Well,
I like it too.
Another thing I want to actually ask both of you, but we'll start with Julie. It's just like getting into kind of board dynamics right now. It's just like you've been on, multiple boards. You've got a lot of experience there. When you think about, what do founders need to know? What do sales and marketing leaders need to know about board dynamics at a period like this? And maybe what is it that they need to deliver on that maybe their board isn't saying, or what is their board thinking?
Yeah, so the board, I mean, every board I've worked with as either an advisor, a board member, or as a member of the executive team, they're very interested nowadays in your ICP, your ideal customer profile. They want to know that you have it down to every discrete detail. And so looking at what is your ICP market? Who are you selling into? Do you know this market just infinitely well? And what's your success rate in selling into that? How are you converting those into deals, and how quickly? What's the velocity of the pipeline? If you don't have that motion down to a T, then your model is not working. It's going to fall apart at some point. And so understanding that at each part of that funnel and how that works and who you're selling to and how you convert those into AR is incredibly important. And companies need to know that boards are looking at each part of that funnel. And so, how is the product delivering what the customers need? Is the marketing team delivering up the ICP accounts? Are the sales team performing? Are they executing and able to convert those into deals? And then how is the team that's managing those deals executing on, the net revenue retention, keeping those customers loyal, adopting the product, et cetera. And so they do look at that very, very closely. I'm seeing with the boards, again, the NR is incredibly important more than ever, and the profitability, to your point, and very, very smart spend are the top of mind issues. And then I think they're also thinking about what is 2023, how is that going to play out? How are you thinking about your expansion plans? Are you, in terms of product, in terms of geographic footprint, in terms of your channel strategy, are you able to have a multiplier effect there? And so all those are incredibly important to a board. And then, quite frankly, every board meeting I've been at, they bring up aspects of the employee experience. They want to know, how are people doing? How are people performing? What's the sentiment right now within the organization? And that's been a nice change, I think, in the last 20 years, since the beginning of my career, where it was not really talked about too much. it's now considered vital to the success of the organization, how the culture is playing out and our employees engaged and happy. So that's a nice thing to see that that's really evolved.
I love all the companies that I serve on the board of. I just want to start with that. And so you never have favorites, right? But I love what Worktango is doing. Worktango, formerly Kazoo, owned by Vista Equity. Vista's a great organization. They do really well by their portfolio companies. And I would say that the two things that the board does really well there that I think are instructive for other organizations. Number one is that you can't let the shareholder experience perspective take over the management of the business, right? And so if you're in, the board context and, ultimately everything gets bubbled up to metrics and charts and spreadsheets and all that stuff, when you identify an opportunity to improve the organization, you can't go back to the organization and deliver all of that information from a shareholder perspective because people don't identify with that in a human way. And so it's like, like in our business, Steve, it's like what runs our business is this notion of earned revenue. Earned revenue, you could like take 4 years of business classes to figure out what earned revenue means and how it works and all that. But that's not how you motivate people to, care about the things that drive the success of the business. And so I think Worktango has done a really good job of translating things that are important to shareholders into a language that's delivered through the employee experience perspective that's mutually beneficial. The second thing I would say is that surrogation at the board level is the biggest issue. And so when I talk about surrogation, I mean that, companies have strategic goals, they have a vision, et cetera. As they should, someone raises their hand and says, how do we measure this? How do we know if it works? And so you create a dashboard, you've got all your metrics. Over time in some organizations, the metrics become surrogates for the strategy. And then in an effort to hit the metrics, the strategy is forgotten. And then the tactics to achieve the achievement of the metrics runs counter to the strategy because the strategy has been forgotten and the metrics have become surrogates. And I think Worktango does a great job of that as well around just like asking our, every quarter, are these the right metrics? If we have to do something to hit the metrics that violates what our customer experience vision is, what our EX vision is, et cetera, then maybe we should think differently about whether we have the right metric or not. So I would say just not coming down from an SX perspective, shareholder experience perspective with communications inside the company and being very careful about surrogation.
I think that's incredibly relevant. We had OKRs at some of the companies I've worked with, and I don't think you ever want too many OKRs. We had maybe 5 to 7, for example, big picture items. And then we would have data sets, KPIs that would kind of back those up that we would track. And I'm a big believer in being data driven, but that said, we're humans. People are running, it's people running companies. It's people that have the relationships with customers. It's people that are building the product. You want to make sure you foster and maintain that passion and that vision and that mission. And that consistency of that brand passion will shine through and customers will see that. They get excited because you're excited. But metrics are important. Data is important, but don't lose your passion and your mission and strategy that you set forth.
I totally agree. And that's a perfect case study for surrogation. OKRs for people out in TV land and radio land, objective, key result. The objective is often visionary and aspirational. The key result is often metrics driven. And frequently in an OKR environment, the KR part forgets the O part. And so to hit the KR part, you end up, just going against everything that was in the O part.
Right.
That's the art part of management. That's the art part of being on a board, is not to get over rotated on the KR.
100%.
Well, cool. We're coming up on time here. Julie, thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us. This has been incredibly interesting to listen to and just to get your perspective and insights. We really appreciate you joining us. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, we do have a question. What is the art on your wall?
That is my son, Sam. He did this when he was 5 years old. It was a moment in time where he's always been into art, but he was sitting out on our deck and he just started painting. He threw some leaves on there and some colors. And at some point he said, I think I'm done. And I said, you're done. You've done it. And I put it on the wall and it's been there ever since. So
well, I think someone must have heard about your background in art and then saw that beautiful painting in the background.
Yeah, I will let Sam know. Thank you for inquiring.
Get him an agent.
Yes, I would love that for him. He is very creative. He's 11 now, but has continued with art. No, I was going to say that when I mentioned earlier about being clever, you guys taught me the art of clever. Man, you guys, there's nobody that does it better than the Starr Conspiracy. And you really are able to break through the noise. And I was very fortunate early in my career at Cornerstone to be able to work with you and work on those clever ways of getting to market, being smart, not necessarily spending millions of dollars, but getting to the buyer and having that resonate with them. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're too kind. We really appreciate your kind words. So Brett, you want to have the final word and take us out?
No, I think that was a beautiful conversation, and I think we should just leave it there. Thank you so much, Thank you so much for your time, Julie. We really appreciate it. I guess I will say, okay, I'm doing it. I will say that this series of conversations that we're having are with the folks that we call the legends of work tech. I think that I'm very grateful for the fact that we can bring people like you, Julie, into a conversation like this, because there are a lot of folks out there, founders, employees, even people on the HR side who are trying to navigate the world of technology solutions and services solutions, who have never been through periods like this, or the things that we've experienced, multiple times over the years. And it's such an honor. And I hope that everyone finds the same value in it that we do. And just loved the conversation. I'm so grateful that you spent your time with us today.
I was very happy to do so. And by the way, I've listened to some of the other conversations you've had in these chats, and they're really fantastic. So encouraging everybody to listen in. And I think they're going to be recorded and shared and available post webinar. That's great.
Absolutely. We'll be sending them out.
Keep up the great work. Look forward to speaking soon.
You too.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, y'all.